Conducting a case study. What is a case study? A case study, in simpler terms, is a way to reach a solution to a question or problem you may have. In doing so, it commonly focuses on a small group of individuals that are observed and interviewed to determine why an instance might be occurring. This method creates improvement not only in the learning aspect of education, but also in the teaching aspect and atmosphere in a classroom. This can occur through many forms of observations and interviews that may be occurring regarding different aspects of the classroom. Not only does this narrow down situations to a certain problem, it can also help one determine which methods or styles are working in the best manner within the classroom setting. The case study is a great way to kind of answer any lingering questions you might have regarding either like your classroom or certain instances that are happening um, within the education facility. Why is it used? In what circumstances is it useful? Although case studies are rooted in sociology and anthropology, this method can be used in a wide variety of other fields. This method is set out almost as a trial and error method of research. For a scenario in a classroom setting, a teacher may be wondering what methods might work best for certain groups of students within her classroom or within a lesson, and this teacher can kind of test this method by observing students and their progress throughout the activity or interviewing students to kind of see where they felt the most comfortable within that lesson, where they felt like they were falling behind, and this can kind of help narrow down where she might be able to alter the lesson plan. Case studies hold a foundation in finding solutions to problems or questions you may come across in many different aspects. Other ways that a case study can be used are in determining how prerequisite courses might have an effect on future courses, and that could be regarding teaching or learning methods, activities completed, or kind of even the information that is used in a prerequisite course and how it might benefit a student within future courses. Case studies can also determine the many aspects that a student feels comfortable within a learning environment. And with observation, a teacher can kind of narrow it down to see if their classroom setup is warm and welcoming and kind of helps students thrive in their education in a place that they feel secure and safe.
Strengths and weaknesses of a case study. On one side, in your strength, it offers an in-depth analysis into the topic or subject that is being researched. You are able to get hundreds of data samples that can be collected from many different sources, of course, depending on the topic that is being researched. The data can also show moments of atypical movements, information we are not used to but possibly know about. For example, someone may have the flu but only show some of the symptoms. It does not mean that they do not have the flu, but that they have uncommon side effects of it. And for your weaknesses, only one specific thing is being looked at in the data instead of all of it, depending on the researcher. So sometimes they can nitpick from the data that they have and use that as their information. There could also be a bias from the researcher if they pick and choose from the data that they are being presented with. And one important thing about the weaknesses of a case study is that it cannot be used to make generalizations. The data cannot just stand on its own. It will have no standing.
The reason why we have to gather data in a research project or in any case study is to be able to look back at the information that's gathered. Without the data, there is no usable record of the research, and there's no possible way to complete a study of any case. In this chapter, Kinkit describes how we can use data gathered to review the case study and to apply it in the situation for why we had the case originally. We can answer the question that we had and the reason why we're doing this study. The data collected is to show the details and outcomes of the specific study. It can show what the study is about and how it applies. The data also shows what happened and when, along with whom it concerns. It can also show how the data affects the study or what changes happen over time. Because there are many different ways of collecting data, it is beneficial to collect more than one type to allow the researcher to correctly interpret what the information on the study reveals. Kinkit also talked of these various ways in tables and figures to show how they can apply to the correct context of the study, and she describes the ways to collect the original data. By collecting data in different methods that match the situation and recording this data, the research can be interpreted and understood by others, and these outcomes are able to be foreseen along with being able to answer the original questions that this case study asks for.
So, breaking down the case study that we see in the Kincaid reading, what we wanted to see is how it looks like in action. So what I did was kind of break it down by its basic components into the framework of a case study that we typically would see, into the subject of research, the environment, the data collection, what the objective of the research was, and the conclusion that was found by the researcher, as well as kind of determining my own self-determination of the purpose of the method here. So going through it, what we see is a small group of participants being studied, the 7 ESL speakers along with the instructors, in a freshman English seminar course that goes on for an extensive period of time. And what she does in this time period is she gains lots of information. She's observing the students and the course material, the instruction. She's handing out surveys that have multiple choice questions to kind of gauge where the students are and how much knowledge is being transferred in terms of writing here, as well as in-depth interviews with the students and the instructors as well. And so what she wanted to do with this research was to determine, based off of her other literature reviews that she did, was to kind of do a compare and contrast with the data that she collected here in this study. And so what she found out and what she concluded was that there was transferable knowledge being taught to ESL students, which is fantastic. That's what we want to see in those types of environments, of course. And so what I kind of determined by the significance of a case study here is to gain a student's level of understanding. And to do that, you have to observe for a long period of time, and that's what a case study allows you to do, is to just sit in and gain the perspective of the people you're studying, almost like ethnography, but not quite as in depth. And so the other case study that I found was, ironically, a case study in contextual adaptation and the transfer of writing abilities. So similar to the other one that we just talked about, but it was the study of who they called under the pseudonym Martin, as they described as an accomplished writer, and he was required to do some sort of community service for his son's football team, and so they wanted him to write a few brief summaries, but he's not the brief summary type of guy. He's the more novelist and not short with his words here, and so he had to adapt his writing abilities and writing skills to this new way of writing. And so what they wanted to see again here was to understand how how much was being transferred of the writing skill in even the most experienced writers, because if we can see how well the writing transfers for experienced writers, we can sort of gauge where beginner level writers are in terms of transfer of writing ability. And so what we can kind of see is that that it does support, obviously, a negative transfer theory, but that's more of just, it's negative if it's not 100%. So if there's like 75% that gets transferred, it's not the best. It's not absolute. So we're not getting full positive transfer. And so again, what the purpose of this case study here is to show the transfer of knowledge is not a seamless process, but it takes time for people to adapt to new skills and to learn new things, as we have learned as writers, of course, that it's not going to happen overnight. And so, yeah, so that's what case studies essentially look in action day to day. Observation over extensive periods of time. Thanks.
The significance to researchers and teachers of writing in performing a case study is mostly in how a case study can allow these teachers and instructors to gain additional knowledge about their own individual styles and how those styles can evolve alongside a case study. A case study's needs are very many, and as those needs evolve with a particular case study subject, an instructor could find many ideas and many new means of developing their own writing techniques that are based off of methods of service and interaction with a case study subject, similar to how the students might. Ultimately, a case study is very significant for both student and instructor alike. As a case study's personnel should be able to adapt to new circumstances and create a new form of operation that follows their needs, so too should an instructor's writing style be something that evolves alongside them as they perform their duties in the service of a case study subject.